Content warning. This episode of Popcorn Podcast discusses sexual assault and family violence. If you or someone you know needs help, please call 1-800-RESPECT in Australia on 1-800-737-732 or send a text to 0458 737 732.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Popcorn Podcast with Leigh and Tim, where we're sitting down to give you our review of It Ends With Us, based on the novel from Colleen Hoover. I'm Timmy Flynn, movie buff.
And I'm Leigh Livingstone, entertainment journalist.
And we love to talk all things movies.
So let's do it.
Let's do it, my friend. It Ends With Us tells the story of Lily Bloom, a woman who overcomes a traumatic childhood to chase a lifelong dream of opening her own business. A chance meeting with charming neurosurgeon Ryle sparks an intense connection, but as the two fall in love, Lily sees another side of Ryle. When Lily's first love, Atlas, re-enters her life, her relationship is upended, and Lily realizes she must make a tough choice for her future.
It Ends With Us is directed by Justin Baldoni from a screenplay by Christy Hall based on the best-selling novel by Colleen Hoover.
It Ends With Us stars Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, Jenny Slate, Hassan Minhaj, and Brandon Scalina.
Well, we mentioned at the top of the episode that It Ends With Us is based on Colleen Hoover's best-selling novel, which spent an incredible 140 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list.
Wow.
The novel's a deeply personal story, and it was written, Hoover has said, to better understand her mother, who made the choice to leave an abusive relationship when Hoover was very young. It's an incredible personal story.
Now, Leigh, one of the things I kind of want to bring to the forefront here, which I really, really love when we review films coming from different perspectives, because you have read Colleen Hoover's book and I have not.
Yes.
So I'm really keen to understand both our experiences with this film, because you come in with a different preconceived notion, expectations of what the book had given you, and will the film live up to that, the knowledge of the characters and the plot. So that's part of the review that I'm most excited to understand.
Yeah.
The differences in what we took away from it.
I'm really curious to know your thoughts too, as someone who hasn't read the novel, coming in with no knowledge, as you said, or preconceived ideas about what's going to happen. One of the biggest questions I have, but we'll get to it in a minute, is whether or not Ryle was a likable character to begin with for you, because this story, the book is also a bit controversial for readers, because some have questioned whether it romanticizes violence and Lily's choice at the end of the book to keep Ryle around and co-parent. So that happens at the end of the book, while others that have read the book have praised that it's a realistic reflection of this kind of relationship. Personally, in terms of the book, I think the book was wrapped up a little too neatly. I don't think it's the reality for many that they would keep an abuser around in their life to co-parent their child. You know, they often need to hide or keep very firm boundaries and safety measures in place to protect them and their child. So I can't imagine personally, from a personal point of view, that I would ever want someone like that in my child's life. So the film stays clear of that without giving too much away.
And I think that's a really important distinction between the book and the film, whether or not it comes from a place of Justin Baldoni and screenwriter Christy Hall listening to the noise around that, the experience of readers, and wanting to not make good, but offer a different sort of outcome for the character of Lily Bloom in the film that won't sit well with everyone. But I guess that's what cinema and art does, right? I think if anything, this film for me presents many perspectives and contexts for the characters in the respective situation, whether they're the abuser or the abused. And I guess to try and help understand why, but more importantly, to offer support in thought as an audience member of what truly matters when being a voyeur to those in trouble or troubled. Does that make sense? It's kind of like you asked me.
Is Ryle likable to begin with?
Yeah, to begin with. It's an interesting question. I was actually quite taken aback by his very explosive entry onto the screen. He literally comes in hot on that rooftop.
Massive red flag.
Massive red flag. He's already demonstrating his temper and his careless violence with things. And of course, he then switches a light, which is quite a common trait of abusers, right? Where he can just turn on the charm and the sex appeal. And you understand why Lily may have fallen in love with him. I think that's what is clear here. But I wouldn't call him a particularly likable character because there were just subtle red flags throughout the film for me that didn't sit well.
I think in the book, he's quite an arrogant character. Like, he's a neurosurgeon, so he's very confident. And in the book, they make it a lot clearer that he's not up for a relationship. I don't think that was made very clear in the film, that there was a tension between them, that they didn't think they should be together, but I don't think that was really explored very well in the film. And in the book, he outright says, I'm a womanizer basically, and I'm not down for a long-term thing. And then eventually he kind of gets hooked on her and can't stop thinking about her and decides to, I put in, quotes, change his ways and settle down with her.
Yeah, the whole womanizer perspective sort of comes from other people in the peripherals. I think Alyssa, who played by Jenny Slate, is his sister. She seems more shocked than Ryle himself that he's kind of quote unquote settling down with Lily. So maybe the character of Ryle is more vocal in the book about, I'm a womanizer, I'm not looking for this, but it seems to be people on the peripherals that have more of an opinion on what he's like as a person, and that it is truly shocking or unexpected that he's choosing to settle down with someone.
And I think a lot of our critique of this film is going to be coming from a place of what the book did versus what the film did. And it's not about comparing the two, because I think what people maybe don't think about often is that a novel is just so rich in language and events. And if you were to lift the scene straight off the page into a movie, it would be way too long.
Yeah.
So a book is always going to have to be compacted in some way or another and change things. It just has to, because you change one thing or remove one thing and then it's a knock-on effect and you have to remove other things. And, there's so much in this book that's not in the film, and people might have an issue with that. But you do have to remember that you can't, like the rooftop scene, for example, let's go back to that one. In the book, it plays out as a lot more flirting and a lot more cute banter to get to the point where the attraction is solidified. But in the film, it happens very quickly. Like, it plays out as a very strong and fast connection between the two of them.
Yeah, he basically gets to, I want to have sex with you pretty damn quick, doesn't he?
I mean, he does kind of in the book as well, but she keeps him at arm's length and sort of, it plays out a lot more of a cat and mouse sort of attraction where they both go, no, this isn't a good idea. And that goes on for quite a while. Whereas in the film, they immediately go into a very hot and volatile relationship. I think the film, it does linger in montages quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think they maybe could have fit more in if they hadn't done that. And especially with the scenes of abuse. Okay, it's a bit of a spoiler. It is a bit of a spoiler, but we won't go into too much detail about it. But the filmmakers didn't want to show too much. We actually had a chat with Justin Baldoni. He was a guest on the podcast.
Yes.
He talked about the reasoning behind pulling back on the violence. But they did spend a lot of time in those scenes anyway.
Yes.
Which I thought was too long.
Now, do you think creatively it was not misleading, but they reveled in the fact that there were these bigger quote-unquote reveals later in the film? I guess we could say Lily Bloom is a bit of an unreliable narrator to her own story, but there's context behind that in terms of how people who are abused, that vicious cycle of abuse, and how they compartmentalize and throw the truth and the reality aside because it's too painful to deal with.
They might explain it away.
Of course, because what is really clear here is Lily is in love with Ryle, so just like everyone else in the peripherals could never imagine him being an abuser, of course the person who loves him the most doesn't believe it either.
Yeah.
And then there's the manipulation and coercion that happens as part of that. God, it's truly awful.
One big change from the book in the film that I think has impacted the film in not the best way as well is that they made the choice to not reveal Ryle's backstory directly from him. In the book, it comes directly from him.
Right.
And I think that goes a long way to Lily excusing his behaviour or trying to help him because he has quite a troubled past, which we won't reveal. In the film, they give that speech to his sister, Alyssa, played by Jenny Slate.
Okay.
And I think in doing that, they've given her more to do, which is great because she gets this really emotional moment with Lily.
Yes.
But in doing that, you take away a bit more of that explanation as to why a strong woman like Lily might stay in an abusive relationship.
Okay.
And that is supposedly the big driving factor of this film, is to take the onus of asking that question, why does a woman stay?
Yes.
To stop asking that question.
Because it is the easiest question to ask, right?
Yeah.
Of course, us looking into a situation we're not part of, we don't truly understand. This is where empathy comes into play. To not ask, oh, I can't believe she didn't leave. I would leave. It's like, do you know what? Stop talking and just try and understand why they might be in that situation. They feel powerless to leave, right?
Exactly. And I think that's my point, is that some of those creative choices have taken away those opportunities for empathy to understand why Lily might stay. It can also be seen as excusing his behavior, I guess. So maybe that's also why they changed it a little bit. It's a really, really tough one because, again, it goes back to that whole not romanticizing or excusing the behavior.
I think what this film does quite successfully is it doesn't try and give you answers, right? I think that would be a dangerous slippery slope. It's not saying this is how it should be and how it should be resolved. It's more an opportunity to sort of bear witness to something awful and try and understand why characters are in that situation and sort of just follow them through their journey. Either see yourself in those situations to improve your own behavior if there is a mirror up, whether you're Ryle or if you're Lily, then to listen and see something and hopefully feel empowered to make a change. Can I just ask quickly, in the book, so Ryle tells Lily about his troubled past, like his demons. Does that happen quite early on in the story? Because in the film, it's not revealed to you until late.
Yeah, it's revealed quite late. And again, I think that sort of becomes like an excuse of some kind.
Yeah, like an moment for Lily
Yes.
when she never knew. Okay.
Yeah. I think it does happen a lot earlier in the book from what I can remember. And I wanted to speak more to that universality that you were talking about, because it is a universal experience. 1 in 4 women experience violence from an intimate partner. I mean, think about how many women you know. 1 in 4, right?
It's chilling.
And 93% of sexual offenders are male. The numbers have dropped over the past decade, but it's still happening. But by the same token, it's also a deeply personal experience, and no woman's experience of violence is exactly the same as another. So you can't paint it with one brush in this film.
No, absolutely not. And I think it's clear that people will take different experiences away from the film, like any film. But this one being particularly pointed will have more visceral sort of takeouts for some audience members. Speaking of the sort of understanding the characters and the unique situation that is at play here, how did you find the structure of the story, the constant flashbacks, the past of Lily and how she encountered and nurtured that relationship with Atlas, and we sort of build the building blocks of the truth unravel over the course of the film?
I mean, in the book, there's more of her past. I think that also goes a long way to show how even the strongest woman who has experienced it and knows what abuse looks like can find herself as a frog in the pot, where little by little the water's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. It can be excused away until you look back and wonder, shit, how did I get here? You know, it's not weakness. It's, as you said before, manipulation and gaslighting and coercion.
Yeah.
And that's such an important message in the film, that it can happen to anyone.
Yes.
And I think, again, by not having more of her past in it, like you said, there was a lot of flashbacks. I felt there could have been more.
Really?
I felt like it didn't touch on her past enough.
How interesting.
And I feel like if they'd shown the dichotomy of that a bit more, you'd also get to understand her relationship with Atlas a lot more. How did you feel about understanding this connection with Atlas?
I mean, I got to know probably more about Lily as a teenager in those moments than I got to know Atlas. I think you really started to connect with Atlas more when he was an adult because of how he reacted to support Lily through what he could see was her being in an abusive relationship, even though she either couldn't accept that she was or couldn't see at the time. It was a beautiful relationship. Again, I think I wanted more because I quite enjoyed that part of the film, or those parts of the film where you got to sort of sit with these characters in their past more. How did you think Atlas came across in the film, especially in those younger years?
I wanted more of it. There's more to his story, which is really, really important to understand him as a character. I think the chemistry of the adult actors, you know, Brandon Sklenar and Blake Lively was incredible. I felt their connection immediately.
I just loved them together.
Yeah, there's no shade on that, but there's so much more that happens and his support of her that's ever present but never overbearing.
Right, so you think creatively there could have been some editorial choices.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really icky sort of way of saying it. But, like different sort of narrative choices where they could have pulled back on some things that Justin Baldoni reveled in and marinated in to give more time for story and character.
And I think it's important to note that it's not just on Justin Baldoni. Like Colleen Hoover really wanted him to make this film. She saw him as Ryle and she encouraged him to play Ryle, which he had no intention of doing to begin with.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So Colleen Hoover was very involved behind the scenes as well, as was Blake Lively as a producer. There was quite a collective making this film led by Justin Baldoni. So, yeah, it's important to note that there was a lot going on behind the scenes. And there's also heavy involvement from the charitable organisation No More, which is an organisation dedicated to ending domestic and sexual violence. So they worked with them heavily behind the scenes to be a sounding board for some aspects of the film, including the ending, which has changed in the film.
So we've seen the film a couple of days ago. Have you seen the sentiment or reaction online to the changes in the film and how they're being received by audiences yet?
I think everybody's quite understanding. I've seen a lot of people cheering the film on, especially women who have had this personal experience. I think it's really successful in speaking to that personal experience, I think.
Yes. Yep.
It's interesting also, you talk about online sentiment. There are now whisperings of creative disagreements happening behind the scenes of making this film, that the cast don't get along with Baldoni and he hasn't been involved in press with them or photographed at premieres together. I don't know about that, but it's a very high stakes film to make. Like, it's one you really want to get right.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes to show whatever the collective experience is in some of these things that are surfacing, clearly there's a lot of people investing their heart, soul into this. And, it's just tense times, I would say.
Yeah, it is. And the book speaks to people so strongly. It's like I said at the beginning, it's a deeply personal story, but not just for Colleen, but the countless women who experience family violence and sexual assault. And then you have a man wanting to translate that story. And, fair enough, Justin Baldoni has a very vested interest in this area as a humanitarian. But we talk about how important having the perspective of lived experience can be in telling stories like this, right? And anyone can make a film about anything. That's true. It's all about imagination, it's art, it's creativity, it's about the research you put into it and the people you get to consult. But especially in a film like this, you need to put in the due diligence to make sure you're treading carefully, especially if you are a man, right? And from what I've read and seen on the screen, I really do feel like that was done.
Well, yeah, and that's sort of like only a perspective that you can bring, right? And that's really comforting that you have that experience and feel like it did speak to all those layers. And I think that even though Justin was the man behind the camera, I have comfort in knowing that the author Colleen Hoover was so invested.
Yeah.
Blake Lively playing Lily was a producer, like you said. There's some really important, prominent female voices that feed into this story.
A domestic violence charity is heavily involved as well.
Yes.
And also, like, for people who don't know, Justin Baldoni is also the co-founder of Man Enough, which is a movement founded on the belief that by undefining traditional roles and traits of masculinity, men will realise their potential as humans and their capacity for connection, which sounds a bit wanky, but it's basically just saying it's unwrapping that toxic masculinity and the traditional expectations that can lead men to behaving in certain ways. And he spoke about his own journey with masculinity in a viral TED Talk in 2017. And that was around the time the Me Too movement was gaining momentum. That video has been viewed over 8 million times and it's a really moving talk, so it's worth watching. He's released books on the subject. I mentioned he co-hosts the Man Enough podcast. It seems as though he's really invested in making change in this space. I don't know him personally, but that's what's coming across in the work that he does. And he also continues to speak on the topic at college campuses across America. So I would hope that he's put the work in, and I feel like he has.
So what you're telling me, you didn't become besties after your 4.5 minute conversation with him? You guys had a really, really beautiful connection, by the way.
Oh, thank you. But no, it was a really interesting chat, and I was really looking forward to speaking with him because of all those things that I just mentioned. Like it's a big task being a man and taking up a story like this. Like what, to put it bluntly, what makes you think you are the person to tell this story, a woman's very deeply personal story? And I think he knows that.
Yes.
And he recognized that and he put the work in.
Yeah, I completely agree. And he's a very, very good director as well. I like how he does use and move the camera and gives the opportunity for character to be at the forefront of how he tells a story. He can shoot a film really beautifully too. I mean, let's talk about Lily Bloom's florist shop in Boston. I mean, gorgeous. It made me want to go to Boston, and I've always had like an interest to go there. I know my dad really wants to go to Boston one day, but have you ever seen like a florist shop like Lily Bloom's? No. Like it was next level.
I imagined it when I was reading the book to be a bit more gothic.
Oh,
like the way it's described in the book is that she's really into like the purples and the blacks and that. But they did come across in the set design as well. God, it was gorgeous set design.
It was absolutely gorgeous. And I know a florist, a very close family friend, and she's done like all of our weddings. And like floristry ain't a glamorous job, but I don't know, Lily Bloom was very, very glamorous.
And her shop was always so full. Like flowers don't live that long.
Yeah, they die, girl. They die.
I know, but it was always so lush and beautiful looking. I'm not complaining.
Always. It did, if anything was romanticized, I think that owning a small business like a floristry was sort of romanticized in this film. We'll have to call that out.
And locking up at 5 p.m. to go for dinner at your ex-boyfriend's restaurant.
Yeah.
As if you can walk out the door on time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, florists are up at like an ungodly hour to go to, the flower markets and all the rest of it. So she was operating on very little sleep and she pulled it off. Is
there anything else you want to talk about with the story and how it played out? I'm just really curious to see what you thought of like the pacing and the structure of it. And
yeah, maybe just to quickly build on something you said earlier about the book, obviously, like any book, it's like a universal thing. You cannot ever translate every word on a book to screen.
Unless you're Peter Jackson, then you'll give it a red hot go, right?
You'll give it a red hot go and then make extended versions that would break a human to like do in one seating, which
you have done
many times.
I've done many times. You don't invite me either, you bastard.
Next time, oh gosh, rude. But true, you weren't invited the last time, but I'll make sure that's not the case. But we digress. Yeah. I would love to talk about Lord of the Rings, not gonna lie.
This has taken a real left turn, this review.
It has. We've gone into a fantasy land. So it's interesting that you say that. It's obviously the elephant in the room. The book is never going to be fully translated onto screen. However, I did feel like the 2 hour, 10-minute runtime was slightly too long. If I reckon 10 or 15 minutes could have been trimmed around to make the pace move a bit quicker. But that's really one of a small criticism that I had. Shall we talk about the characters and performances, Leigh?
Yes, I'm dying to talk about Isabella Ferrer, who plays young Lily in the film. And this is her debut feature role. Like, your mouth is on the ground.
It is.
What incredible casting as the teen version of Lily. She not only looks like Blake Lively, but she was able to incorporate her mannerisms in the character and that confident, enthusiastic way that Blake Lively performed this character while also bringing this young vulnerability to it. And bloody incredible performance.
You summed it up so beautifully. But now that my jaw is off the floor as I listened to you, I was watching her performance and I was thinking really, really strange things like, oh, so is this how artificial intelligence is going to be used in cinema? Because the quirks of the mouth movement that is so just specific to Blake Lively as a performer.
Did you think it was AI?
No, of course I didn't. But I'm thinking this can only be artificial intelligence.
Because it was so spot on.
So spot on. I thought they've done something to her voice. Like Isabella, her voice work is incredible. I thought it's been dubbed by Blake Lively, but no, I mean, she just has absolutely nailed the likeness, which made you connect so much more to Blake Lively's adult version of Lily Bloom because her performance was just so beautiful.
It was really, really good. I stand out completely. And of course, Blake Lively's incredible too as Lily Bloom. We know her obviously.
She's magnetic.
I know, she really is. She is really the definition of a movie star, isn't she?
Right.
That she can act. It's not often that you get like a movie star that can act. Well, not often. It is often. No, I was going to say not every movie star can act, and not every actor can be a movie star, right?
Yes,
but Blake Lively can be. Like, she's both. Yeah. She is both. She's glamorous, she's beautiful, but she's also incredible as an actor.
And I've been a fan of Blake Lively for a long, long time. I was in that sweet spot pocket of the cultural phenomenon that was Gossip Girl, and I watched that show religiously. And so I've kind of grown up with her as an actress, and she really has matured and takes on these fantastic roles, and she's just so magnetic, and she has chosen like a really, really difficult, challenging role here, but she gave it so much nuance and care. She was an absolute joy to watch in this film.
I really liked her in A Simple Favor. I can't wait to see the sequel of that.
Oh, see, okay, I haven't watched that film, so I'll have to give that a watch before the number 2 comes out.
We also have to talk about Justin Baldoni as Ryle. We've spoken about it a bit earlier on. People will know him from Jane the Virgin. He was intimidating, he was overbearing, and I think he was charming. All the things that Book Ryle was and should be. And the chemistry with Lively was scorching. They did a great job. Hot, hot, hot.
They were hot, hot, hot. And it was, a little bit, should I look away? But it was uncomfortable in a few different ways. It was like, all right, I'm in this intimate moment with them. But it's also just that unsettlement underneath that, whether or not it's going to happen in that moment or in the near future, you kind of knew what he was capable of and what Lily had to endure. But
the moments I was most impressed with, though, actually, in his performance were those moments where he changed.
Yes.
And you saw it. You saw something in his eyes and his demeanor, and I felt nervous. I could see it coming.
Yeah. And because he's quite a big guy, he had muscles on him for days. He was very imposing physically. 1 minute you were attracted to his physique, and then the next you were terrified of it because of what it could potentially do to harm someone. And I think he found balance in his character to portray that. And I think just to call out his eyes, like you said, truly terrifying at times.
That's the thing about the book version of Ryle as well, is that there are so many red flags from the very beginning to do with him, but Colleen Hoover writes him in such a way that he is so charming, and you go back and forth from hating him to liking him to hating him to liking him. And I think that quality is so important to translate onto film, because again, you have to understand why she stayed.
Yes.
Do you think he pulled that off in his performance, that duality?
I do understand. I see it. So I think he did achieve that. Yeah.
And then we've got Brandon Scleaner as Atlas. You will have seen him in Midway in 1923, the Yellowstone spin-off. He's very much what I wanted Atlas to be from reading the book.
Right. Oh, that's great.
But like I said earlier, I feel like we didn't get enough of their shared history to really feel his presence properly in the present day and understand how much of a rock he was for her.
I completely understand, and I feel like there could have been more there. You come in with knowing more about his character, so that was more of an emptiness to what was portrayed on screen there. But I just really, really adored how he treated Lily, the clear love and support as a friend and as a support network for her. That scene on the couch where she was at his place, and there was just such humanity in that dialogue, in that connection, and he brought a great humanity to his performance, Brandon. I thought it was wonderful.
And I can understand the creative choice, I guess I'm speculating here, that they kept him in the background just a little bit more than he was in the book, because they wanted Lily. They wanted this to be a female empowerment film, which it is. It's a story of female empowerment, absolutely. Yeah. But they wanted to really drive that point home too. And so keeping him on the back foot stops him from being that savior that comes in and swoops in and saves the day.
Yeah.
Which he isn't in the book either. He's not. But they've been very conscious of that, I think, in how they've made creative choices about his character in the film.
Yeah, and I think that came across well. It was Lily's story, and I think they achieved that in the end. I want to talk about Jenny Slate, who plays Elisa. She was a breath of, well, not fresh air, but just such levity. Fun. And just a brilliantly hilarious performance at times.
And she's that in the book too. She nailed the performance. She's really, really, really fun and like basically a bored rich housewife who just wants a
Literally.
job.
But unashamedly so. She comes in hot like her brother Ryle, but just in a very, very different way.
Yeah.
And I just love witnessing the sisterhood that was developed between her and Lily. It was really, really beautiful to see. And those moments of just cutting some of that tension and that levity and just her ability to just the quick fire dialogue and her little aside looks and stuff. There was just such joy in watching her character on screen.
And she's not judgmental at all. Like she loves her brother and she loves Lily as a friend. You get the impression that like Lily is her only best friend, like her only real girlfriend.
Yeah.
And she's in a really difficult position between being stuck between the two.
Yeah, it would be a truly horrific realization for her to have about her brother. And I think the dialogue around that is handled quite well.
I love that she's also standing in solidarity with her. You know, like
Yes.
you could very easily turn around and go, well, it's my brother. I'm standing by my brother. But you're doing the right thing. She's doing the right thing and standing up for another woman.
Yeah, absolutely. We really, really love to see that.
Hassan Minhaj plays her husband, Marshall. He's pretty much the same as the book. He doesn't really have a lot to do. Does he?
Yeah, he's just the rich guy in the
just
corner
there.
that gives context to, I guess, Elisa's lavish lifestyle and her ability to sort of gallivant around
Exactly
and be
right.
fabulous.
Exactly right. One thing I didn't enjoy seeing, this is just a very personal thing, is Kevin McKidd. I love Kevin McKidd, and he plays Lily's father in the film. People will know him obviously from Grey's Anatomy, from Owen Hunt in Grey's Anatomy. He's a very lovable character, Owen Hunt. And
Here, not so much.
no, but I love Kevin McKidd. I don't like seeing him in roles like that.
Yeah, I mean, when you associate an actor with a particular type of character and personality, it's like disorientating when you do see them manifest in something that is truly shocking. So yeah, I totally hear you there.
Shall we wrap up our review of It Ends With Us?
Good idea, my friend. It Ends With Us is an all too important story to tell, and its global reach is something to celebrate because it is another way to help break down the stigma and silence of those who suffer in abusive relationships. Justin Baldoni has directed with care and compassion, with Blake Lively and the supporting cast delivering meaningful performances. If you see yourself in this film as the abuser, please stop and get help. If you see yourself as the abused, I see you, and I know you can take the brave step to free yourself from the pain and get help. I'm going to rate It Ends With Us 4 out of 5 popcorn kernels.
Thank you for that message, Tim. That was really, really beautiful thing to say. And I'm sure it means so much to so many, including myself. While It Ends With Us is adapted with the care and nuance the subject matter demands, the result feels a little uneven and rushed. The aim of creating this film is to further the conversation and encourage change in the way we treat and understand victims of domestic violence. In doing that, the film is extremely successful. The chemistry from the cast is spot on and its visual appeal is just stunning. And the bones of the book are there. But for those who are big fans of Colleen Hoover's novel and have lived experience, they may find some of the creative choices and omissions take something away from it. It could have reached higher with more of Lily's backstory and Ryle's manipulation and her mother's eventual revelations, which we didn't really talk about, but that's very different in the book and I think adds something again to that different perspective of what different women go through in this situation. I'm going to give It Ends With Us 3.5 popcorn kernels out of 5.
Thank you, Leigh, for sharing your unique perspective on this film, having read the book and enjoyed the book. So yeah, it's a great conversation. We look forward to hearing your take on the film as well, friends. So let us know whether you're a fan of the book or just the film. We'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget to check out our interview with Justin Baldoni, the director and star of It Ends With Us, or where all good podcasts are found. It Ends With Us is in Australian cinemas from August 8.
As always, friends, thank you so much for listening.
We'll catch you next time.
If you enjoy our episodes, make sure you're subscribed on your favourite podcast platform. It's free. While you're there, we would love you to rate us and leave a review.
You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Samsung Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Alexa, Overcast, Pocket Casts, and where all good podcasts are found.